1 with the 5 subtopics and part 2. For part 1, we have the nature of physical science education, which includes that of physics, chemistry, and earth and space. Pero since ang subject natin this semester is only for physics and earth and space, we're going to focus on those two only. Number 2 is the contribution of physical sciences to society. Then we're going to delve into the skills in learning the physical sciences. I believe, however, that we have discussed some of the skills in learning the physical sciences in the discussion for the curriculum guide or the framework for science teaching already. So dadagdagan na lang natin yon, tapos i-specify natin yung mga skills in learning physical sciences. So then we'll have to discuss about the factors to consider when choosing a method of instruction in teaching physical sciences. I think I have only 4 or 5 na pwede nyong pagpilian. So sa model, ang diniscuss natin ay 3 lamang. Tapos dito sa mga method, may isa-suggest din lang akong mga 4 or 5. But it is still up to you kung ano yung gagamitin yung method kapag kayo na ay magre-recorded demonstration teaching. Okay, and then we have teaching approaches commonly used in physical science classes. I think I also have chosen 5 also, 4 or 5 teaching approaches. But again, I am not limiting you to choose from any other approaches kasi pag-uusapan naman natin yan when we do your lesson planning. And then for part 2, we'll have the principles of physical science education. Okay, so let's get it started. Am I clear and loud on your end? Kasi masyado yatang may nakita pa ako na na-remove sa class natin kanina, si RJ. Hindi siya makakabalik sa room kasi kapag once na ni-remove siya. Juven, can you help RJ to resolve the issue? Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, di daw po makajoin si Wela. Sige po. Pakisabi na lang kay Wela, we will send the presentation na lang. Basta i-accomplish ang mga kailangan i-accomplish. Okay, thank you. And then, let's have our first topic on the main lessons from history of the physical science teaching. So one of the very nature of physical science teaching is it is progressive. So, which means that it is ever developing or growing. So it never stops from change. This has led, therefore, to new knowledge or conventions, the names, and new units. In physical sciences, specifically for Earth and space, we know very well that it is really progressive. Nagbabago even the content. Say, for example, once I can consider ang Pluto as one of the planets, but nowadays, we do not consider it as a planet, but rather a dwarf planet. Kasama po niya si Ceres, ni Eris, tsaka si Makemake. So, isa lang po yung patunay that indeed, in the physical sciences, it is progressive. So, that is one of the nature of physical science teaching. Progressive ang nature ng physical sciences. If you're going to tell me, ma'am, maski naman po biological sciences, tama. Even for biological sciences, progressive pa rin ang isa sa mga nature ng sciences. Kasi nga, maraming nagbabago. It is developing, it is growing. So that's the key term for it being a progressive or having a progressive nature. So to teach in a progressive way, a teacher has to do the following. First, it is very important that we use the new edition of textbooks. Ma'am, what if, for example, we do not have textbooks available? So there are still other options, other alternatives that you can do. We have the Google, we have articles that are year in and year out being updated. So pwedeng yun ng mga maging sources natin of information. So we do not limit the information from the textbooks that you have or from the teacher's notes. Pwede kayong mag-go outside of the box and see how rich the online libraries can offer. So marami tayong pwedeng pagkuhanan. So gone were the days na sasabihin ng isang bata, hindi siya makakapag-research kasi wala siyang textbook. Kasi anywhere, available ang mga materials natin. Okay? We can also ask other people, or we can attend a number of seminars, we can read journals, or we can use the internet. So those are the 4 very basic ways on how we could adjust to the ever-changing world of physical sciences. So in short, for us to be updated with the content of physical sciences, both for physics and earth and space, we just need to do the following. Again, we have to use the new edition of textbooks. We can attend number of seminars, to read journals, and internet use para tayo ay makahabol sa pagbabago. Also, um, one of the nature of physical sciences is it is multicultural. Cultural. So the main known contributions actually came from the following. We have the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Russians, the British, and so on and so forth. So ibig sabihin, the knowledge is not only owned by just one specific culture, but rather it is a combination of the findings of different scientists, different explorers, physical scientists, at saka transdisciplinary din, multidisciplinary, aside from it being multicultural. So that is one of the nature of physical sciences. Number 3, it has a humanistic side. So pag sinabi nating physical science as a humanistic side, it comes out that early scientists worked for like long hours under selfless conditions, and then most discoveries were made after long periods of experimentation and frustrations. That is the very reason why it has been reiterated to you that we have to have positive scientific attitudes if we really wanted to discover more. So, isa sa mga pinaka binilin-bilin natin for scientific attitude, determination, perseverance, patience. Hindi tayo nag-uumpisa at hanggang umpisa lang tayo. Hindi tayo nag-uumpisa tapos kapag nag-fail tayo, feeling natin failure na tayo kagad. Because we can always try. We can always give second chances ba. So that's something that is humanistic. So that's one of the nature of physical sciences. It has a humanistic side. We have to consider some scientific attitudes so that we will be able to justify our findings, our discoveries, experimentations, etc. Okay? Also, there is a practical orientation of physical sciences. And when we say the practical orientation of physical sciences, keyword lang natin is meron siyang application in the real world. So lahat ng konsepto natin sa physics, lahat ng konsepto natin sa earth and space ay mayroong application sa daily living. The moment that you walk, meron kayong konsepto ng friction and third law of motion. The moment that you appreciate the birds flying up in the sky is also third law of motion ulit. Kasi the more that it flaps its wings, bababa, ay ang thrust niya pataas. So if we're going to think about it, lahat din ng ginagawa natin has a practical orientation. Example, kung sa biology lang sana, marami tayo dito. At the moment you wake up, pag-stretch mo pa lang ng kamay mo, ng mga paa mo, that has something to do with a biological concept. Pumunta ka sa CR, nag-toothbrush ka, that is a practical orientation of biological concept. Ganun din sa physics, ganun din sa earth and space. Bakit may umaga? Bakit may gabi? Those are some examples. So sabi ko din sa inyo noon, of course, when we inject the practical orientation of physical sciences in our classes, we have to make sure that we contextualize. Our examples should be chosen properly. Tulad ng sinabi ko sa inyo dati, paano mo ituturo ngayon ang direksyon ng silangan at kanluran sa isang bata? So narinig nyo na, ang sabi ko, usually sinasabi ko din yun, pati sa mga anak ko, para mas madali nilang matandaan. That silangan ay kung saan isinisilang ang araw at ang kanluran ay kung saan siya ikakanlong. So ibig sabihin, doon siya magsiset. So those are simple explanations that we can give to our children. Specifically, very challenging sa inyo kasi elementary school students yung mga yan. So kailangan we have to go back to the basics. We have to go back to the basics. We have to inject applications for physical sciences. And that is always. Hi, Jovelyn. Whoa, okay. Silangan tsaka si kanluran. Okay. So these are the 4 na masasabi ko na common between teaching physics and teaching earth and space na nature. So, ang nature niya, they are progressive, it's ever-changing, right? Multicultural, ibig sabihin, combination siya ng iba't ibang mga lahi para ma-find out nila ang mga content na ito. Humanistic siya, kasi ibig sabihin, there's like a personal touch. So pag nagtuturo tayo, kailangan i-connect natin siya sa number 4, practical. Dapat may real-world application talaga siya. And if you're going to think about it, all of these 4 are really true. Not only for physical sciences, but also for biological sciences. Okay. So for the first part, do you have questions so far? Sa apat na nature. Do you have a question? Okay, so kung wala ang tanong, let's move on to the specific contributions of physical sciences to society. So if we're going to think about it, we could start by naming the following. First, we have the computer, the laser. We also have the transistors, WWW or the World Wide Web, the telescopes that we use in school or at home maybe, the radars, are all contributions of physical sciences. It is very important, therefore, that we have to remember the following. It is a central part of our culture and will continue to inspire many people. It reveals important universal truths, notwithstanding certain strands of postmodern thought. It will also continue to underpin all science and technology for the foreseeable future. You know, science and technology or the product of sciences is really very progressive. It's ever-changing. Baka bukas makalawa, hindi natin alam kung ano nang meron sa cellphone natin. So the transition from the old cell phone to the new one really has a very significant change. Kung dati, ang cellphone natin ay malaki, pang text lang or pang tawag lang. Ngayon, ultimo pag-BP, pagbilang ng number of steps sa isang araw, pag-take ng pictures, pag-edit, music, nandyan na din, balita pwede na, may TV, may cellphone na may TV, etc. Lahat nandyan na. And we can just imagine how our life would be without all of these technologies. So it is really very important for us to like appreciate man lamang ang contribution ng physical science to our society. It is also and will continue to be essential for analyzing and solving urgent environmental and energy problems. So say for example, our urgent environmental problem is still climate change, global warming hanggang ngayon. On second thought, however, parang nakikita natin yun na kasi normal din lang naman yan na magkakaroon talaga tayo ng ganyang change. But can we mitigate it? Can we do something about it? Para man lang at least ma-lessen yung effect niya. Or at least man lang, mas matagal pa na panahon na mararamdaman natin ang kanyang talagang effect sa atin. Masakit man tanggapin, most of the time, anthropological ang factors niyan. Ibig sabihin, may kinalaman tayong mga tao. But I do believe and I am hopeful, dahil tayo ang rason kung bakit meron tayong mga ganitong global problems, meron din tayong magagawa. What are the things that we can ask our children therefore para mabigyan ng or ma-address ang mga issues to? So maybe you can ask your students to be mindful of their environment. First off, marami na ngayong bata ang nahilig sa milk tea. Tama. Kung kayo ay gusto ding mag-milk tea, okay lang din naman siguro. Hindi naman na ba nitong plastic na to. Pero meron ka bang magagawa after mong uminom ng milk tea? Anong pwede mong gawin doon sa cup? Anong pwede mong gawin doon sa straw? Para man lang, ibig sabihin, tayo ang isang pinakamalaking factor bakit tayo may ganitong global issue. Pero, tulad mo nung sabi ko, I am hopeful that we can also do something about it. How about issues on physical sciences? Energy problems is one. We make use of electricity. Araw-araw, 24 hours talaga. At lahat tayo guilty. Mula sa pag-charge ng cellphone, pagkagising mo, hanggang pagtulog mo, gumagamit tayo ng kuryente. So, since ang kuryente natin at ang fossil fuels natin ay non-renewable source, why not use renewable sources? Like, why not tap the energy coming from the sun? Para man lang ma-mitigate ang problema natin for global warming once again. So, ibig sabihin, paikot-ikot lang. But, it will still be considered an essential issue too that needs to be addressed, not only by you, but by everyone. And it is very important for us to teach our children at the onset. Okay? Next one, it plays a unique educational role. So, physical science plays a unique educational role. It makes our students and you also realize how life would be without gravity, how life would be without friction, how life would be without electricity. So see, ini-imagine nyo pa lang, pero kapag ituturo nyo yun yung mga questions na pwede nyo tanungin sa kanila. So you place them in a situation that would let them think critically and to make their stand. At dapat hindi tayo natitigil sa making their stand only. If they made their stand, they have really to do something about it. Because words will ever be useless without action. So yun ang challenge din ulit sa inyo as future teachers. Since it plays a unique educational role, we have to maximize on how to use the concepts of physics and earth sciences as we try to integrate it in our lessons. So parang nagiging itsura ngayon ng lesson plan nyo, if you're going to visualize it, kailangan laging meron tayong affective domain. Paano ko ilalagay ang incidental learning sa lesson plan ko? So titingnan natin later on. Second to the last, it is global, which is the basis of shared understanding and shared ideals. It has been said, even before, that local issues are global issues. And yes, that it's correct. Ang local issue mo sa Pilipinas ay pwedeng maka-affect globally. I think you would agree with me. Kung problema mo ay oil dito sa Pilipinas, problema natin ang oil sa buong mundo. So, we affect each other. Okay? So, one of the contributions of physical science is that we have to let our students realize that our local issues are also global issues. Huwag mong sasabing nagsunog ako, saka doon lang naman ako sa bakuran namin. Bakit? Yun bang usok? Doon lang sa bahay mo? Hindi din naman, di ba? So even if it is localized, tinapon mo ang basura mo dyan sa ilog nyo. Bakit? Taga-Nasya naman ako. Ang problema ng taga-Kamiling. But if you're going to think about it, we affect each other. And that is true. We have to let our students realize that even on that end, physical science has its own contribution to the society. And last, it sets the standards of rational thought in the face of irrationality. And it helps and upholds the primacy of observation. Ibig sabihin nito, it gives us an opportunity to think, even if we think that the concept is irrational. In short, lahat na lang ng nasa paligid mo can really be explained through science. Ooh! Mami, bakit hindi ko ma-explain? Bakit hindi ako crush ng crush ko? Well, parang hindi nga talaga. Well, sasagutin natin sa susunod na meeting. Pag-iisipan ko kung paano natin sasagutin. But kidding aside, what I'm telling is that lahat ng issues na nasa paligid natin can be rationally explained or justified through sciences. That is the reason why, ang sabi niya dito at the end of our sentence, the last sentence is that it upholds the primacy of observation. So pag sinabi natin primacy of observation, we always go back to what is observable. Kasi nga, facts-based ang science. So those are the things that we need to remember. So to sum this up, sinasabi lang niya na ang physical sciences ay maraming contribution sa society. Okay? Wait lang. Andrea Bell. Saglit lang, Andrea Bell. Andrea Bell, nasan ka na? I-admit kita, kaso wala na yung request mo. Joanne, pa-help naman si Andrea Bell. Okay, balik ako doon ha, tapos you just tell me kung nakita nyo na nag-ano siya. and rebel. Okay, so balikan ko. Ulitin ko po ha, na whether we like it or not, there is um, a contribution of the physical sciences to society. Okay, now what are the skills in learning the physical sciences? So the first one, very first, is communication skills. So communication skills, it is one of the 21st century skills. And they involve acquisition of physical science languages, such as, dapat alam natin kung anong pagkakaiba ng theory sa law, ano ang pagkakaiba ng limitations sa delimitations kasi research-based ang sciences. So when we say communication skills, we have to have some acquisition of physical science languages. Dapat nagkakaintindihan tayo. Okay. For social skills, this involves being able to get along with other people, respect for others, and working effectively in groups. Why? Basically because we are social beings. We cannot go away with working with others. And believe me, even in informal settings, we can really learn something from others. Nag-usap lang po kayo ng katabi ko, tapos may natutunan ako sa kanya. And that it's real. That is real. Kahit may makatabi ka sa jeep, tapos nagkwentuhan kayo out of the blue, believe me, you can learn something from others. I repeat, because we are basically social beings. Number 3, we can also have the skills in learning the physical sciences, that's mathematical skills, which involves, therefore, computation, graphing, and arranging, among others. We cannot go away with mathematics kapag sciences ang tinuturo natin. Kahit biology po, yes, there will always be computations in biology, like population density. Sa physical sciences, lalo pa. Like gravity, meron tayong compute. E paano po pag Earth and space? Yes, the speed of light, etc. So we cannot go away with math. So hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na, mahina ako sa math, magsa-science major ako. Tapos pagdating mo doon, dami din palang math. Kasi basically, mathematics is the language of science. So we cannot go away with mathematical skills in learning the physical sciences. We also have the aesthetic skills. So this involves something about presentation of charts, of models. Why is it very important in the physical sciences that we know how to present charts and models? Because in this way, we can simplify our thoughts. Ito yung tipong, pag titingnan mo yung graph, pag titingnan mo yung table, alam mo na kung anong ibig sabihin niya. Hindi mo na kailangan, kahit hindi mo na babasahin kung ano yung dinidiscuss niya, basahin mo lang kung paano siya ini-interpret. Or, rather, I would say, pag tingin mo ng graph, alam mo na kung paano i-interpret yung data na pinapakita niya. So, this is among the 4. And in addition, we also have the following. Safety skills. Bakit? Kasi, it is very important na meron tayo nito, especially for working in laboratory. So, a person keen on scientific processes must be quick to execute correct processes and are supposed to be timely. Alam niya gamit ng first aid measures just in case nagkaroon ng accident sa laboratory. So this is basic, and I think this is being taught to first-year students, grade 7. So very important na skill to, na umpisahan hindi lang sa grade 7. Kayo na magtuturo sa elementary level should teach your students some safety skills. Just like in the last semester that we have had, during the submission of your scripts before, nabansin ko na kapag magpapalaboratory, importante talaga na meron kayong paalala. So, part siya nung lesson plan nyo kasi naka-detailed kayo before, lalagay nyo talaga doon kung ano yung mga safety measurements, ang mga safety protocols in the laboratory. That is an indication that you just cared much about your students. Importante kasi that while you are delivering content, you are also making sure that your students are safe. So, kailangan ng safety skills. In connection to the safety skills, the laboratory skills are very much needed. These are further classified into the manipulative skills and process skills, such as in handling the things that you need in the laboratory, or for process skills, or in processing the things needed. Example, the step-by-step procedure. Kailangan marunong sumunod ng instruction ng mga bata. But of course, meron tayong call bilang mga teachers. That is, when we give our instructions, they have to be really very clear. That even if our modality is guided lamang, wala tayo doon sa tabi nila, they can well perform the activity even without you. Kung meron ka, kung nandyan ka, okay lang din. Very important yun, lalong-lalo na in the new normal. Ma'am, hindi na natin to kailangan ngayon. Safety skills, laboratory skills. And I would say, why not? E paano kung halimbawa, you will be asking, or you will ask rather, your students to do specific activity in their own homes, with their families. Kasi, eto na tayo eto na yung new normal. We don't meet them in school already, but their homes become their schools. So, paano kapag meron kang i-demo na activity, tas gagawin nila yon sa kanilang mga bahay? So, it is really very important for them how to use the materials that you ask them to use. Okay? So, that's safety skills and laboratory skills. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin sa akin na wala na po yan. Kasi wala tayong laboratory. Remember, the model that I'm going to ask you for physics in our class specifically is exhibitory. So, mag-i-exhibit kayo ng isang experiment. Magdi-demo talaga kayo. So, importante na pinapaalalahanan natin ng mga estudyante natin on how to do that. And when we demonstrate it, we ourselves should have safety skills and laboratory skills. Okay, so that's in addition to the 4. So, paano natin i-consider ang mga lessons natin when we choose a specific method in physical sciences? So, of course, we have to learn something about how would it be effective to my students. Of course, ang pipiliin mo, unang-una, it has to be an effective method. Ma'am, how would I know that it is an effective method? How would I know that it is an effective method? Sa physical sciences, meron silang pinopropose an effective method. So a teaching method which seems most effective is one that is learner-centered. So even in the science curriculum framework, sinasabi niya that a heuristic or discovery learning method is one of the ways on how we teach physical sciences. Aside from that, we can also have inquiry-based. Napag-aralan natin sa SPA, spiral progression approach, kung bakit mahalaga ang discovery learning. And I have read from your outputs that discovery learning enables our students to learn on their own. Therefore, they can become more independent learners. They can become more active learners. They become accountable in their own learning. So, ilan lang yun sa mga pwede niyong ma-develop using the discovery learning method. The expository, on the other hand, or teacher-centered, are not so effective and are not encouraged in physical sciences. Talagang mas madalas tayo na nag-hands-on for physical sciences. That's the reason why hands-on din talaga yung ipapagawa ko sa inyo as our major requirement. Teachers, therefore, should strive to use methods that facilitate the learner's understanding. So this method is intended to involve students in intensive learning activities. What students need to succeed in achieving their learning objectives is to ask questions. We can start our lesson by asking an intriguing question or a motivating question, or a question that would enable them to think critically. For this reason, questioning skills are really heavily used in this method. So learners should be encouraged to ask questions as well. That's the reason why I also ask you to please ask questions whenever. Medyo hesitant nga lang yung iba, or sometimes sinasabi wala na po silang naisip na question. But I would really I would appreciate it very much if you ask questions for the sake of discussions. Kasi nga, baka may mga clarifications kayo. Galing na din ako dyan, estudyante ako, naging estudyante na din ako, na pag tinatanong ni teacher, okay, may tanong kayo, tapos, kahit may tanong ako, pretend ako na wala akong tanong. Kasi nag-hesitate ako ng tanong. But gone are the days na hindi uso ang contestation sa classroom. We should open our classrooms for contestations. Ibig sabihin, we open our classrooms for asking questions. Kunwari, okay lang ba hindi mag-agree kay madam? okay lang. You point out your view, I'll point out my perspective also, we talk about it. That's what we call discussion. Kasi kung one way lang, akin lang galing, lecture ko. Okay? So, we have to choose, one of the factor to consider when choosing a method of instruction is the effectivity of the method. And I am telling you, in our science classes, very effective ang heuristic or the discovery learning method, which are all based on inquiry-based na nasa curriculum framework naman ng sciences. Okay, so yun yung gagamitin natin. Okay, inquiry-based. We ask a question at the onset. Let the students discover what the lesson is all about. Okay. Then we also have to consider our objectives. So from the instructional objective, the teacher can determine which method he or she may use for teaching. Example, to prepare or determine the elastic constant of a material, the learner need to perform laboratory practical sessions. So, sa elasticity, kunwari ang lesson mo. So, you have to fit your objectives to the method of instruction that you are going to use. Kung ang objective ng lesson mo is to help them design a viable generator or solar generator that can be used for a classroom setting lang, kahit ilaw tsaka electric fan lamang. Ano kayang magandang method of instruction ang gagamitin mo? Magle-lecture po ba ako? Mag-lecture discussion po ba ako? Mag-project method ba ako? Magpa-problem based ba ako? Etc. In short, nakadepende ang method of instruction mo sa objective ng lesson mo. Eh ma'am, paano kung ang na-assign sa aking lesson is identify the sources of light? Yun lang po ang aking objective. Ano po ang magandang method of instruction mo? Nasa'yo, pili ka. You can actually have discovery pa rin. Papakita ka ng isang situation o kaya ng isang experiment, tapos doon nila malalaman kung ano yung mga sources and non-sources of light. Ma'am, pwede din ba ang lecture discussion? Aided with the mental representations maybe or pictures, visuals. Pwede din yun. But if you think that it would be more appropriate or more meaningful para sa mga estudyante mo, napakitaan mo sila ng experiment and let them do it by themselves or let them do it together with you habang ikaw ay nagle-lesson, then so be it. Sa tingin ko, mas effective yun. Hands-on will always be the best method in teaching physical sciences. Mahirap nga lang mag-design. Andun na tayo. Pero I believe that you can do it. Okay? Another factor to consider when choosing a method of instruction, of course, is the class size. Ma'am, di naman na tayo sa classroom setting. Pwede naman po siguro kahit malaki ang class size po. Nakadepende pa rin po yan. Even in the way that you group your students, you have to consider class size. Ang sabi ko nung nakaraan, when grouping our students, iwasan natin yung very large groups. Kasi nagkakaroon tayo ng tendency na pagod ang isa sa mga kagrupo dahil hindi naman ini-involve ng ibang mga kaklase or ibang mga kagrupo yung kanilang mga sarili. Just for the sake na malista lang ang pangalan, tapos na. Yun na lang ang participation. Hindi talaga sila involved or engaged dun sa process. So we have to consider the number of students within the class. So a teacher handling a large class will most likely arrange for demonstration rather than class experiments or many group discussions. Or another alternative is that you divide the group. You can demonstrate, then you divide the group. They'll do their mini experiments. Okay. Advantages yon on both our sides. Advantages yun sa mga bata kasi they get to work with other people. Advantages din yun sa mga teachers kasi instead na mag-uulit-ulit siya, magde-demo siya ng lesson, magde-demo siya ng isang activity sa isang grupo lang, tapos isang grupo ulit, 3 beses siyang nag-demo. Kawawa naman din yung teacher. Ngayon, sa situation natin ngayon, it would be lesser. If I'm going to demonstrate it to you, kahit 100 pa kayo, you can do that. But, for the breakout sessions, pwede nyong pagawin yung mga estudyante nyo in small groups only. So class size is one important factor in considering or the choice of method of instruction. You also have to consider resource availability. Hindi pwedeng sabihin mo lang doon na ito yung mga materials na gagamitin natin. Kuwari, baston ni San Jose ka mo. Iisip mo sa estudyante, anong baston ni San Jose? Eh, hindi naman available sa community namin yun. In short, you have to think of alternatives. Baston ni San Jose is usually used for making pH papers. Instead of pH papers, kung wala kang pH paper, gagawa ka ng isang liquid na gamit ang baston ni San Jose para ma-identify mo ang pH level or ang acidity at alkalinity ng isang liquid. Okay. Now, question is, ano kung wala siyang baston ni San Jose? Okay, hindi niya alam kung anong baston ni San Jose. You have to know as teachers what other alternatives are you going to give. Example, pwedeng yung eggplant na violet, yung kanyang spill, pwede din yun. pH indicator. What else? We can also have Mayana, yung violet na cabbage. So those are the things that can be alternative to the baston ni San Jose. Okay. Paano po dun sa physical sciences, sa physics, for example, o kaya sa earth and space? Ano-ano ang mga pwede? Kunwari, you are asking them to observe something. Ma'am, wala kaming telescope. Pwede silang gumamit ng magnifying glass. In short, we have to look for alternatives if the resources are unavailable. Resource availability kasi can lead to either the teacher demonstration or class experiment. And lack of resources has led to either no practical or demonstrations by teachers. Imagination lang ang hulog nyo. So it is very important for us to know what resources are available. And if the resources are unavailable, you have to know how to improvise, or at least you have to know what other alternatives are there in the immediate community. Okay. Kaya halimbawa, ang lesson mo is about the sound. Nasubukan nyo na ba yung parang champagne glass in production of sound, the pitch of sound, differences of pitch of sound, tapos yun ang gagamitin mo sa lesson mo. Babasahin mo konti yung finger mo, tapos iikot mo dun sa rim niya. Kapag mas mahaba yung paanong wine glass, ano ang mapuproduce na sound? Higher pitch ba or lower pitch? Tapos mag-observe sila, tatlong magkakaibang laki. Kunwari. Tapos yun ang gagamitin mo. Eh, paano po kapag wala silang ganun? Other alternatives? Yeah, they can use yung pinanggalingan ng tissue, lagyan nila ng rubber band. Tapos pitikin nila yung rubber band, kapag ba mas mahaba yung sa rolyo ng tissue, mas mababa ba ang pitch or mas mataas ba ang pitch? They can also use yung lata ng gatas, for example. Lalagyan nila ng balloon sa ibabaw, talian ng rubber band. Tapos, i-describe nilang sound, mas mababa ba or mas mataas ang pitch kapag magkakaibang lata. Depende sa diameter, depende sa kung gaano katangkad, gaano kataas. In short, iisa lang ang lesson. It's about to prove whether there is a difference in pitch of sound when you are prompted with different materials. Wala kang wine glass, pero meron kang lalagyan ng tissue, yung pinagrolyohan ng tissue. Wala ka ulit rolyo ng tissue, pero meron kang basyo ng gatas. Wala kang basyo ng gatas, pero meron kang mga bote sa bahay. In short, we can always improvise. Hindi mo sasabihin sa mga estudyante mo, okay, no resources, no classes. Hindi po yun po pwede. So we have to make sure that we know how to improvise. Okay. Number 5 is the entry behavior of learners. And this has been one of the problems for physical sciences. Once your students hear the word physics, there's a fear. There's a fear that I cannot do it. There's a fear sometimes. They're anxious. They worry too much. Narinig pa lang nila yung word na physics. So we have to watch out for that. The entry behavior of learners is one of the factors that we have to consider when we choose the method of instruction. So let me read. This includes the psychomotor domain categories of learning such as imitation, manipulation, precision, articulation, and naturalization. In short, their readiness to work hands-on. Gusto ba nila? Okay? So, kapag halimbawa, mas okay sila na gumagawa kaysa sa nakikinig, then, ang method of instruction mo ay gagawa talaga kayo. Kasi, you are considering the entry behavior of the learners that are entrusted to you. Otherwise, kahit gaano pa kaganda yung method of instruction na sa tingin mo, pinili mo, pero hindi yun akma sa entry behavior ng learners, your plans will be put into vain. Sayang. Sayang ang effort. Nagbihis ka pa man din. Tapos, hindi din naman pala yun ang fit sa kanila. So, we have to really choose our methods of instruction. So, may mga methods of instruction ako na pinili for you for physical sciences, both for physics and earth science. Didiscuss natin yan mamaya. And number 6, we have to consider also teacher preferences or styles. Hindi kasi tayo pare-parehas. So, the teacher chooses a method which she or he feels comfortable to use. The reasons are rather personal, and yes, because of that, we have to be very keen. Ano yung mag-fit sa akin? Ma'am, ano po kasi, mas okay ako na i-demonstrate ko, or mas okay ako na pre-recorded. Nakaka-conscious po kasi kapag on face-to-face, or rather live. Tapos i-record pa ni Kuya Joel, diba? So, in short, nasa ating mga teachers, ang ibibigay ko lang ngayon, bibigyan ko kayo ng mga pwedeng pamilian kung paano. Malapit-lapit na tayong magplano. Because as I am seeing your syllabus, we have Unit 1, Unit 2, and Unit 3. Sa Unit 3, dyan kayo magpaplano. So, i-revisit natin paano gagawa ng objectives, ano yung mga choice natin for methods, and the methods will be discussed today. Bibigyan ko kayo ng mga pamimilian. Anong model ang gagamitin ko? Pero yung model kasi prescribed ko, di ba? Investigatory, exhibitory project for physics. At saka, flipped classroom sa Earth and Space. But both of which, yung development ng inyong LP ay inquiry-based pa rin siya. 5E ang suggested na itsura ng inyong LP. So, hindi nyo pa alam yung 5E na itsura ng LP, yan ang magiging lesson natin sa mga susunod na weeks. So, hintay-hintay lang tayo, but if you have spare time, tapos gusto nyo nang planuhin yung lesson nyo, tapos i-shoot natin sa 5E, pwede naman po yun. Okay. So, to summarize, these are the factors that we have to consider when choosing our method of instruction. First one, piliin natin ang pinaka-effective. At sinasuggest ko kanina, sa physical sciences, ang pinaka-effective is heuristic, discovery method, inquiry-based, learner-centered tayo dapat. Another, the method of instruction should be based on the objective of the lesson. Nakadepende sa objective ng lesson nyo, yung choice nyo ng method. You also have to consider the class size. Pag masyado malaki, you can group your students so that you can actually ask them also to do the activity at least in their homes. Kahit nakagrupo pa nila yung mga nanay at tatay nila. Uuso na ngayon ang mga home-based na activities. Why not? We have to explore that because the home becomes our school now. Number 4, resource availability. So sabi ko kanina sa resource availability, we have to make sure that the resources are available. Or if not, we have to be ready for some alternatives. Or if not, we should be ready to improvise the resources or the materials to be used in our classes. Number 5 is the entry behavior of the learners. We have to consider our learners in developing or choosing our method of instruction. Their readiness for hands-on activities. Because hands-on activities are very much encouraged in physical science classes. And lastly, your choice. You have to consider which method you are comfortable to use. So sa number 6, teacher preferences and styles are still considered. Okay, so far, may questions ba tayo? Kasi medyo makaba-kaba na yung mga iba pang susunod. Huwag niyo sasabing break na agad. Okay, so may questions ba tayo? Or nag-iisip ba kayo ngayon kung ano kaya ang magandang method sa naka-assign sa aking lesson? Magmi-meeting na kaya kami ulit sa susunod na meeting with our group mates? May I know your thoughts? You can type it in the chat box. Hello, B.Ed. 2? Joel? Questions po ba? Please let me know. Nandyan pa ba kayo? Baka nagsasalita ako dito, tapos wala na pala kayo dyan?
Dito po kami, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Ayan, sige. Sabi ni Crystal, wala daw siyang question muna. Na-overwhelm ba kayo so far sa 30 minutes sa dire-diretso? Or naiintindihan nyo ba? Wala din daw, sabi ni Aldrin. Thank you. Sige, magmuni-muni kayo dyan. Kasi ganito talaga muna to. Wala pa ho, Jovelyn. Ayan, thank you. Ngayon, eto yung mga teaching approaches na commonly used in physical science classes. Meron yata akong 4. So, umpisahan muna natin. The first is, of course, ang ating traditional lecture method. So, if you think that would be the best for the objective, for the size of the class, that would be your personal preference, yan ang pwede mong gamitin. Ma'am, hindi na kami makapamili. Sabi mo po sa physics, mag-investigatory kami. Yun lang, but I am suggesting you other things that you can use or other approaches that you can use in your science classes. So, paano ba to? Siyempre, sa lecture method, it is teacher-centered. Nandun na tayo. Thus, not so useful in terms of learning practical skills. So, kung gusto talaga natin ng practical skills, hands-on talaga. But in lecture method, or in physical sciences, we cannot go away with the lecture method. So in physics specifically, there are some topics which do not have practical lessons. Therefore, the lecture method may be applicable. Example is the atomic structure, quantum mechanics, introduction to nuclear physics, for example, requires the use of lecture method. We cannot go away with that. So lecture method used should not be the straight jacket lecture. That is the kind of lecture which is used at our level, the university level, where the student listens quietly and sometimes take notes. At school level, however, integrated lecture method should be used. It is integrated by using questions, examples, resources, and class activities so that it is not so much of an expository method. So this method is improved by using the following model. So ang model na to ay tinatawag sa science na TEB, SEB, SEE. So this technique has been used for lecture method. So ano bang ibig sabihin ng TEB? So teacher, ile-lecture niya, then magbibigay siya ng example on the board. Okay? The traditional type, that's the TEB. After which, mag-go siya sa SEB. At ang SEB stands for, the student will answer questions from the teacher, then he or she will give his or her own example on the board. Okay? So, pag ginagawa ko to noon, ang ginagawa ko, no, ang lesson ko sa physics ay distance, for example. So, lecture ko yung tungkol sa distance, tapos, so ako muna yon TEB, tapos magbibigay ako ng example on the board for them to solve, for example. Tapos, si student, i-ask ko ng question, doon pumapasok ang SEB, sasagutin niya yung konsepto ng tatanungin ko. Tapos si student naman ngayon ang gagawa ng kanyang sariling example. Tapos mag-exchange sila ng classmates niya. Yung ginawa ni classmate 1 tsaka ng classmate 2, kunwari, magpapalit sila. Yung ginawa ni classmate 1, sasagutin ni classmate number 2. Yung ginawang example ni classmate number 2, sasagutin ni classmate number 1. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, nagkakaroon ng mas maraming interaction. So, from the teacher, papunta kay student. Doon na yung second part ng model natin, SEE. Then we'll have the SEE, where students will work on their own. The student, then, some examples in the exercise books will be answered. Thus, the terms TEB, FEB, C of the lecture method. The TEB, SEB, and SEE. Now, etong lecture method na to, nagmumukha siyang lecture discussion kapag gagamitin natin ang model ng TEB, SEB, SEE because in-encourage natin ang bawat isa na mag-participate. Hindi lang kay teacher manggagaling yung problem kasi gagawa ng sariling problem si student to be answered by another student. So by doing that, we are distributing the opportunity to our students to create their own examples and to answer problems from their classmates. Okay. So, pwede po natin gawin yon sa ating mga classes. So, kapag online naman, pwede ko pa rin itong gamitin. So, ang mangyari, mag-example ako, tapos magbe-breakout sessions tayo. Pwede tayong mag-leave muna sa classroom, bibigyan ko kayo ng specific time, gagawa kayo ng inyong sariling example, tapos mag-exchange kayo ni classmate kung ano yung isosolve ninyo. All solving one problem, one concept problem. So, ang concept natin ay distance, lahat ng problem natin ay may kinalaman lamang sa distance. Okay, so that's the tweak of it. Kaya siya tinawag na integrated lecture. Hindi siya straight jacket lecture. So, that's the difference between the two. I repeat, we discourage the use of straight jacket lecture for children, but rather, we encourage integrated lecture or the tweaked lecture discussion method. Okay. Number 2, in physical sciences, kailangan din ng teacher demonstration. At ito yung gagamitin nyo sa physical science, sa physics natin. It is a popular method in most of the schools. This method is preferred under the following circumstances. Number 1, when the resources are limited, the teacher can bring his or her own resources for demonstration. Number 2, when safety is a major problem, the teacher can do the demonstration instead of asking the students to do their own activities. 3, when experiments involve sophisticated or very expensive apparatus, instead of giving the activity to the students, masira pa nila, tapos ang magbabayad sila din, ikaw na lang, mag-teacher demo na lang. Teacher demonstration. Number 4, when there's limited time, we can have teacher demonstration instead of guided discovery, instead of asking the students to do their own experiments. Okay, number 5, when the experiment requires a specific skill which has not been acquired by the student. In short, sa number 5, sinasabi niya na, ikaw na lang teacher ang gagawa. Kasi nga, we do not have that skill yet. Ikaw ang merong skill niyan. So, you show us how to do it. Number 2, teacher demonstration. So, this is a rather traditional way of teaching physical sciences. But of course, I'll be teaching you also, ano pa yung mga iba pang contemporary na pwede pa naming pamilian. Ulitin ko na naman, kayo po ang mamimili paano nyo gagawin yung experiment nyo. Nagamit ba ako ng lecture? Or i-demo ko ba muna? Pwede din yun. Ma'am, pwede ba namin paghalo-haloin? Pwede din po yun. Depende po yun dun sa plano nyo later on. Okay. Although demonstration is very useful, it has got limitations, such as restricting learners from practicing skills, especially handling skills. Kasi nga, ikaw ang gumagawa. Hindi mo na ipapagawa sa kanila. So you are robbing them of the opportunity to practice their skills. Okay? Eh, wala po kasi tayong choice eh. Kakaunti po kasi yung resources natin. Kaya instead ay paggawa sa estudyante, ako na lang po ang magdi-demo. Pero pwede nating i-tweak yun. So maybe later I can give you some tips on how you're going to do it. Number 2, being more of teacher-dominated. And this is true. Teacher-centered ang teacher demonstration. Unless, habang nagde-demo ka, you can randomly call some students, lalo na kapag face-to-face, na i-involve mo sila. O, lagay ka dito ng 5 ml na ganito. Maglalagay siya. O, hawakan mo to. Para naman meron silang attach a bit. Hindi man sila yung gagawa, ikaw pa rin ang gagawa, pero binibigyan mo lang sila ng opportunity to interact with the materials na kailangan para sa experiment. Okay? This also leaves the learners passive most of the time. Pero tulad nga sabi ko, you can involve them. Okay? The passiveness of the students can be reduced by using questions on the other hand. Ask them to participate in readings, observations, etc. so that we can avoid dead times, which make learners switch off from the main activities. So, lalo na sa mga bata, kayo understandable, pero iba pa rin kasi yung attention span nila. Kayo kasi ang kinoconsider namin is your motivation. Kapag ayaw nyo makinig, kunwari ngayon, tapos hindi nyo feel makinig, naka-on lang yung camera nyo dyan, or naka-on lang yung speaker lang kayo, tapos nakahilata kayo dyan, ay motivation nyo na yan. We cannot do something about it. We can encourage you to listen. But since learning is an active process, nasa inyo pa rin yan. Okay? Now, these are some of the procedures for carrying out teacher demonstration. Meron tayong different stages. The first is the rehearsing stage, where the teacher, from the term rehearsing, is to try out the experiment. This helps to check on the availability of resources and their working conditions. Rehearsing also helps in adjusting certain concentrations and like other conditions to give the required outcomes. For new and inexperienced teachers, this stage is a must. But if you have, for example, you are a teacher for 9 years already, nagamit mo na siya noon, kahit wala na tong rehearsing stage. Okay? Then we have the second stage, which is the performance stage or the actual demonstration teaching. So the essence of demonstration is that learners should be able to see what is happening without straining. So the learner should stand in either like semicircular way that is around the teacher in the demonstration table. In our case, for example, here in TAU, kung nakapag-laboratory na kayo doon in your biology classes, meron siyang mirror. Tapos, doon tumitingin yung mga estudyante sa ginagawa ni teacher. So, pwede din yun. Instead of asking them to come near you and then form a semicircle. Kasi hindi na to pwede. Kahit mag-face-to-face pa tayo, hindi na yun pwede. Hindi na to pwedeng papuntahin mo sila lahat sa harap para makita nila yung dinidemo mo. Kasi nag-iba na ang panahon. Okay? So the teacher also must arrange the students in an orderly pattern so that all students are able to see what is happening in the class. So sabi ko nga, you can use a mirror to reflect lang. Yung mirror, doon lang titingin yung mga bata para makita nila kung anong ginagawa ni teacher sa demonstration table. Then we have the third stage or the discussion stage. Hindi natatapos ang demo na dinemo lang niya, tapos na. You have to be prepared with some guide questions. Why is it important? For you, of course, to assess whether the students have observed yung mga kailangan nilang i-observe. Okay? So the discussion should focus on the following. First is on experimental setup, the apparatus, the materials, or the possible alternatives. They should also focus on accuracy of the results and likely sources of errors, underlying concepts or principles, extensions of the concepts and principles, and some patterns and generalizations. Or you can also ask them to draw some conclusions. Ma'am, pwede ko bang gamitin dito yung 6 thinking caps na pinag-aralan natin sa inquiry-based education? Pwede po yun. So papalitan nyo lang. Kunyari, all students who choose the black hat will discuss about the experimental setup, about the apparatus, about the materials and possible alternatives. The students who pick the yellow hat will answer questions on accuracy of the results, blah, blah, blah. In short, ginamit nyo yung mga konsepto na inaral natin sa inquiry-based dito sa demonstration. Balik ako sa tanong, sasabihin mo, Madam, pwede bang mag-combi combination? Pwede po yun. Okay? Pwede ka nga gumamit ng mga characters sa K-pop, for example. Tapos, sila yung pipili. Tapos, sa likod niya, nandun ang question mo, discussion question mo. Maglagay lang tayo ng tweak. Hindi naman siguro take against us yun. Ang importante, nakafocus pa rin tayo sa content. Okay? So, ayaw mo ng thinking caps, gusto mo ng thinking hats, pwede din naman. O kaya gusto mo ng whatever. You can choose whatever you want. You can just tweak it. The important part is that you know how to do it, and when you do it, you have to do it correctly. Remember that sciences is a factual. Science is supposed to be research-based. We have to be exact. Tulad nung sa mathematics din, di ba? If math is exact, meron din ganung some sense of exactness sa science. Hindi pwedeng ang sinasabi mo lang na conclusion ay seemingly, maybe. Because we have to be really very sure of our conclusions. Okay? And who will answer that? Are you going to discuss it as teachers? Or will you expect that from your students? What do you think? Elijah?
Sa tingin ko po parehas po.
Parehas. So,
Kasi
both
po,
perspectives.
yes ma'am. Kasi po, pag minsan po is, meron pong misunderstanding po pag minsan. Kaya po, sa teacher, po yung magka-clarify po. So, ganun po.
Magka-clarify kung may mga misconceptions.
Yes po.
Okay, how about Jasmine? Pwede din bang ang mga kaklase mo ang magka-clarify ng misconception? Kunwari, na-observe ni Jasmine, ganito yung experimental setup. Tapos sabi ni Lovely Jean, hindi naman po ganoon ang na-observe ko. Can the students give their own point of views or perspectives base sa mga na-observe nila sa demonstration lesson? Yes, Jasmine? Jasmine left the group, charot. Jasmine? Volunteers. Bakit ba Jovelyn? Jovelyn, how about you? Is it also possible?
Ma'am, yes. Ma'am,
Yes.
yes. Is it possible that students can share yung naobserbahan po nila sa nangyaring experiment namin?
Kahit-
Kasi hindi naman po pare-parehas minsan yung parang magiging result nung parang syempre po may process yung yung bawat step pag gumagawa ng experiment. So baka sa kabilang gumagawa ng experiment may nangyaring ganto, tas iba yung naging ganun din po sa kabila. So parang okay po na i-share yung
Pero
sa mga
Jovelyn,
student.
nandito tayo sa nagdi-discuss tayo ng teacher demonstration. Hindi gumagawa ang estudyante. Dinidemo lang ni teacher, nag-observe si estudyante. Magkaiba sila ng observation. Is it possible that they exchange perspectives or opinions? Will you allow students to give their own opinions or ideas, give their own observations? Nawala na si Jovelyn.
Maminisip ko pa, charot. Ma'am, kung baka hindi, charot. Kasi po yung teacher yung dapat maano.
Any other idea aside from that? Aldrin?
Ma'am.
For teacher demonstration tayo, no? Tapos kunwari, iba yung na-observe ni estudyante, may share siya. Pwede ba, open ba ang klase na magbigay din ng ibang observation yung isang kaklase?
Pero sa akin po siguro po pwede din po kasi mas okay po na nagkakaroon ng feedback po para maitama po yung possible na mali po.
Okay, tama. Tama yun. And the teacher should be the moderator. Just in case, no? Kunwari, iba yung observe niya. Iba din yung na-observe ko. Tapos si teacher, siya yung magko-correct. Kasi siya ang demonstration teacher. Sabi ni Lovely Jean, para sa akin po, possible po, baka kasi may nakita or na-observe yung student na isa, tapos na hindi na-observe ng ibang student. Correct yun, Lovely Jean. So we can have a healthy contestation between and among our students. But one of the main role of the teacher is to correct any misconception. You should be ready to give your own feedbacks. Okay? Ngayon, kung halimbawa, ma'am, kasi hindi ako magaling mag-feedback. Pa-practicein na natin paano nag-feedback. So, sa mga activities niyo, I'm very open with like giving my feedbacks to you. I hope you're also reading my feedbacks kasi you can learn from those feedbacks, I think. Ngayon, kung hindi ka nag-agree sa akin, pwede mo ding i-type yun kasi mababasa ko naman sa G Classroom yung mga contestations mo. So I repeat, we should always be open for contestations within our classrooms. Okay. Hindi dahil magkaiba kayo ng point of view, masama ka na. Hindi ganon. We should let our students point out their views. But as teachers, we have to be moderators. Doon tayo sa gitna. Ay, mas pogi si student number 1. So, kahit mali yung sagot niya, papanigan ko na siya. Dapat hindi ganon. So, we have to make sure na base pa rin tayo sa results. Okay. Ayan. Si Jovelyn, no? Nagigilty. Siguro ganun. Okay. So, next one. So, ano ulit yung number 1 natin? Lecture method. Pangalawa natin is teacher demonstration can also be used. Then dito pumapasok, Jovelyn, yung sinasabi mo kanina on student practical work. So in student practical work, in this approach, students carry out the important manipulations and other processes under the supervision of the teacher. Ma'am, paano na ngayon? Remote teaching tayo. Paano makakapag-supervise si teacher? I can still supervise you by giving instructions through our GC or through our G Classroom. Ngayon, you really have to be very open to your teacher. Kapag may nahihirapan, lagay nyo lang doon. Kapag may question, lagay nyo lang doon. Kasi that would help your teacher in guiding you or supervising your work. Okay? So the teacher facilitates during the learning process, especially where the learner intellectually engages in rigorous thinking. It is heuristic, which gives an opportunity to the learner to learn and practice their skills. So kung kanina sa teacher demonstration, we rob our students of the opportunity to practice their skills. Ngayon sa student practical work, dahil sila na ang gagawa, we are giving them the opportunity to do the experiment. Sila naman ngayon. Okay? So it motivates also the learner in the given content being learned. And there is a high degree of retention of the lesson content as compared to lecture and teacher demonstration. Why do you think is there a higher degree of retention when you allow your students to do practical work? Ida? Ida?
Ma'am, because pag the more senses involved po, the better the lesson. Ma'am.
Okay. Any other answer? Tama yon. There is a higher degree of retention because the more senses involved, the better. Kasi sila na mismo ang gagawa according to Ida. Who else would like to share? Victoria? Okay, sabi ni Miguel Salvador, they learn po kasi by doing, which is also correct. So we learn when we do it ourselves. Parang tayo lang, mga teachers. Natutunan ko yung konsepto ng theory of relativity noong tinuro ko na siya. So in short, hindi ko siya nung college ako, tinuro sa akin, pero dahil hindi ko siya tinuturo, nahihirapan ako. Pero nung itinuro ko na siya, doon ko natutunan kung paano ang theory of relativity. So thank you for that, Miguel. Any other answers? Learning by doing? Ano pa? May I ask Mika? Hmm. Sabi ni Aldrin, mas natitrigger daw kasi yung knowledge kapag nai-experience po. And that is correct. When we experience it, it becomes part of our system. Therefore, we can learn from those experiences. According to Elijah naman, sa akin po, mas madali pong ma-explain sa students kapag nagagawa na nila. Just as the same case analogy. Saka mo lang matututunan na totoo pala yung sinasabi ni Mama na mainit yung kalderong nakasaang, yung niluluto. Kapag hinawakan mo yun, nagsulpong kanto mo, saka kanto lang matuto. O kaya halimbawa, talon ka ng talon sa kama nung ikaw ay bata, sinabi ng nanay mo, huwag kang tatalon dyan. Kasi kapag nahulog ka, pwede kang masaktan. Natukpol dyan ima na, doon lang siya natuto. Kasi na-experience niya. So those are analogy that may be exaggerations, but they are real. They are true. Unless you experience it, sabi nga ni Sheena May Palacios, it is, or experience is the best teacher. That is correct. So based from our experiences, we can learn something. So we let our students experience the real thing. So paano ba natin yung gagawin? First, we have to design students' practical work. And there are 3 designs that I would like you to remember. First one, the learners are doing the same experiment in groups. Example, nagbigay ako ng isang experiment, group 1, group 2, group 3. 3 grupo kayo. Lahat kayo gagawin nyo yung same experiment. That is design number 1. For practical work design number 2, the learners do different experiments of the same concept. Iisa lang ang concept mo, distance lang ang concept mo, they're going to create 3 different experiments. So ganito yung pwedeng mangyari sa inyong exhibitory project. Kung naka-assign kayo sa sources of heat and light, kunwari, tapos 3 kayong naka-assign, iisa lang ang objective. You have to design 3 different experiments. And that is design number 2. May pahabol si Lovely. Ang sabi niya, mas may excitement at learning kapag ginagawa po nila mismo. Tama. Okay? So when they do it on their own, na mas nai-excite sila, so mas nare-retain. Naaalala nila, anong ginawa ko to? Ito yung nakakatawa. So ang nare-retain, maaaring the concept plus the experience. Okay. And let me continue. The third design is when learners have different experiments of the same concept. Example, ulit ha, concept of distance, 3 different experiments. Then the students have to do it in a rotational manner. Example, ginawa ni group number 1 ang experiment 1. First week. First week, ginawa ni group 2 ang experiment 2. First week, ginawa ni group 3 ang experiment 3. Sa second week, kapag sinabi nating rotational, yung ginawa ni group 1 nung week 1 ay gagawin ngayon ng group 2. Para magkaroon siya, nagiging round robin siya. Rotational. That is design number 3. So let me repeat. We have 3 designs of student practical work. First, learners are doing the same experiment in groups. Second design, the learners do different experiments of the same concept. Number 3, different experiments of the same concept, then the learners have to do it in rotational manner para mai-experience ng lahat ng grupo ang magkakaibang experiment. Okay. Questions so far with regards to the design of the 3 designs of student practical work experiments. Sorry, excuse me po. Questions? Okay. Kung walang questions, ako ang may question. Malinaw, sabi ni Elijah, ako po ang may question. Kung kayo ang magiging teacher, aling design dyan ang sa tingin nyo pinakamaraming benefits? At saka bakit? Key in your answers in the chat box. 2 kay Aldrin. Sige, mamaya natin tatanungin. Do different experiment. Ano yung RJ? Yung pangatlo? 2 din kay RJ. Okay. Si RJ. Sino pa? Sige. So, may dalawang sumagot, number 2. May I ask RJ then to explain to me why you have chosen design number 2 when you will be the one to ask your students to do practical work. RJ?
Ma'am, napili
Bakit
ko po,
number 2?
ma'am. Ma'am, napili ko po yung number 2, the learners do different experiments of the same concept. Kasi mas ma-discover pa po ng mga student yung iisang concept through different experiments po. Kumbaga, mas ma-eager po sila na makuha yung interest ng topics na yun. Kasi parang gusto pa nilang malaman po yun. And at the same time po, matututo po sila ng iba't ibang skills or new concept po. Pero different experiments lang po. Nang sa ganun, mas maintindihan po nila lalo yung isang concept. Parang kumbaga may mastery po na mangyayari.
RJ, itong number 2 na pinili mo, ganito yon. Isang concept, no? Conary distance. Si group 1, gagawin niya yung experiment 1. Si group 2, gagawin niya yung experiment 2. Si group 3, gagawin niya yung experiment 3. Hindi isang group, ma-experiment nila yung tatlong setups. Parang yung sinasabi mo ay mas malapit sa number 3 kung saan gagawin ng lahat ng grupo yung different experiments of the same concept. Okay. RJ?
Mami po.
Kasi parang yung
Mami, yung tupo talaga.
Tupo talaga. So, ibig sabihin, tigi-tigisa lang sila ng experiment.
Opo, ma'am.
Magkakaiba nga lang sila. Okay.
Kumbaga parang
Si Prin,
meron pong focus lang po, parang ganun.
Okay, sige. Meron namang yon. Merong advantages, merong disadvantages. Nasa inyo din kung paano ang gagawin niyo. Sabi ni Trisha, ni Princess, at saka ni Crystal, number 3. Kung ako din ang tatanungin, parang mas madidistribute ko kasi kapag number 3. Yun na nga lang, ang disadvantage kasi ng number 3, kailangan available talaga yung resources. Meron talagang capability din yung mga bata to prepare their own resources just in case hindi siya ibibigay ni teacher. Pero, nadidistribute kasi ang chances sa bawat grupo. Kasi, yung na-experience ni group 1, ma-experience din ni group 2. Yung na-experience ni group 2, may experience din ni group 3. Tama yung sinabi ni Tricia May. Nagiging time-consuming siya, pero napapadami natin yung experiences nila na iisang concept lang dinidiscuss mo, pero naka-experience sila ng tatlong magkakaibang experiment within the group. So tama yun, I agree with Tricia. Sabi niya, medyo time-consuming, maliban sa magastos sa resources. So, in that case, ang napili ni RJ, number 2, posible naman to. Tapos ang gagawin na lang siguro ng teacher, i-share ni group 1 yung tungkol sa experiment niya, makikinig si group 2 at si group 3. Tapos, pag nag-share naman si group 2, makikinig din si group 1 at si group 3. Pag nag-share si group 3, makikinig naman si group 1 and group 2. Para, na lang siya. Ang nangyari, nag-practical work sila. Ayun, so sabi ni RJ, yes po ma'am, para may focus. I-share na lang nila yung na-experience nila from the experiments aside to them. In that way, hindi siya masyadong time-consuming, mas nakatipid pa sila sa resources. Okay. Pero we're going back to the root of this problem na kung ang problema natin ay resources, we can choose one na lang. Kung gusto nating mas madami silang ma-experience, then we choose 3. Kung kulang tayo sa time, kulang tayo sa resources, we can choose design number 2. Okay. Gets po ba? Gets po? Questions? You can raise your hand or you can ask questions. Okay, sabi ni Miss Blessy May, na-gets na niya. Salamat naman po for your confirmation. Okay, now, how do you plan for practical work? First, you have to preview. So parang sa demo kanina, rehearsal. Dito sa preview, you have to ensure that the resources to be used are available and in sufficient quantities, lalo na kung design number 3 ang napili mo. You have to preview or rehearse or try out your experiment or to prepare a worksheet for the students to follow during experiments. Ngayon, sa inquiry-based, pwede din pong objectives lang ibigay mo, sila ang mag-design ng sarili nila. Kaya lang, for elementary school students, hindi pa natin sila masyadong binibigyan ng ganong pagkakataon kasi dinidevelop pa lang natin yung mga process skills nila. Remember the process skills, meron tayong component 1 tsaka component 2. Component 1 lang muna tayo kapag elementary. Okay? So, wag natin muna silang hahayaan na silang mag-design kahit na sabihin natin, ma'am, may tiwala kasi ako na kaya nila. Siguro hinay-hinay baka pwede to prepare them for grade 7. Siguro mga grade 6, pwede na yon. Kunwari, magbigay ka ng objective, sila nang bahala sa method. Okay? Silang bahala anong gagawin nila. Silang magsusulat. Pero most of the time kasi pag elementary, we prepare the worksheet for them. Okay? Or, you can also write instructions on the writing board or dictate instructions to the learners or use chart. So it is very important to write instructions after previewing the experiments and confirming the working conditions of the instruments. Equally important is the decision on which method to be used. This is normally taken after previewing. So that is the first step in planning for practical work. Parallel po siya sa rehearsing ng demonstration lesson. Letter B is performing student practical work, after which discussion, para silang magkaparehas ng demonstration. So, ngayon, ganun din sa review, kung matagal mo na siyang ginagawa, okay lang na wala na tayong rehearsing. Okay? Pero, when our students would perform their student practical work, we have to assure them that we will always be on their sides to guide them. Guided pa rin po palagi. That's the term guided discovery kasi they will discover what will happen to their experiment as they do their practical work, but you are there to guide them. So students who could go into groups, which should have a secretary who gives the report, and the chairperson, or in our context, the leader, ang term natin, who ensures that the practical work is done as expected. You can also provide the learners with the resources or ask them to look for some alternatives. We can give the learners the worksheets, then the learners could start to do the practical activity. Please make sure that you let them feel your presence whenever they do their practical work. Make sure that you let them feel that they can lean on you, that they can ask you questions and you are open to answer those questions. Bawal ang deadma. Hindi yung nagtanong ka ng Lunes, so Webes pa niya sasagutin. Okay? So, kailangan, anytime, tulad ng anong orientation natin, di ba? Like anytime, you have to let them feel that you are just there, ready to answer their questions anytime. So, I was telling my other class last time, because it is this time of the year, the pandemic, that we need each other more than ever. So if the least thing that we can do for others is to make ourselves available for them, please do it. Magtulungan tayo. So just as the same case, as in performing student practical work. Okay? Then you'll have, of course, discussion. You have to end it with discussion. Why? For you to have the chance to correct some misconceptions. So kung namali sila ng method, do not let them feel na mali yung ginawa nila. This is an experiment. This is a practical work. So we have to be open to mistakes. We have to let them know that they could have other chances. Ang problema po kasi kapag practical work ay yung mga pwedeng disgrasyang mangyari. So kapag gano'n ang case, kailangan doon sa performing student practical work, before they start, you have to reiterate safety protocols. Okay, so for the discussion part, you pull or get together all the results. Look for patterns, then certain common behaviors. You can also correct misconceptions in addition to making conclusions. Okay, your conclusions should answer the question or the objective. So kung objective ng experiment nyo is to prove that differences in pitch can be observed using material 1 and material 2, ang conclusion mo ay sasagutin niya yung tanong or yung objective na sinet mo. Make sure that your objectives are really measurable, answerable, so that they can make viable conclusions. They can make correct, accurate, plausible conclusions. Okay. Questions for practical work. So sana nag-gets nyo yung ano natin. So meron tayong lecture, meron tayong demo, tapos pumasok tayo sa learner-centered, which is they do their own practical work. Nagbigay ako ng 3 designs, design 1, 2, and 3. Kayo na bahalang pumili doon. And then I told you how to do it. Kayo na din ang bahalang kung gumawa nito, tandaan nyo kung ano yung mga tips na binigay natin. Okay. I think this is the last one that I would want you to learn, the project work. The project work can either be project-based, case-based, pwede ring, meron pa isa. So project work, pwedeng case-based, simulation-based kapag science. So ang project mo ay pwedeng, ang product niya is a type of simulation. Ang project mo ay isang makakasolve sa isang real-world problem, so that's problem-based. So it comes at the end of every main topic, not every lesson. So kung ang main topic mo ngayong week na to, for Module 1, for example, is the theory of relativity, at the end of the main topic, you can give one project. Hindi yung every week kang may pa-project. Okay? Hindi din project ang bougainvillea, ha? Magpapasubmit ka na lang ng bougainvillea, wala kang maipa-project, tapos sasabihin mo sa estudyante mo, pakidiretso sa bahay. Gone were the days na gano'n ang project. Nung kami elementary, ang project namin, towards the end of the school year, magsasubmit kami ng takkitinwang, di ba? Hindi po project ang tawag doon. Because a project is something that is supposed to be product-based. So sabi ni Sheena, the plantita invasion. Okay? Guilty din ba? Floor wax, ano pa ang mga projects. So hindi siya considered as project. So, ano yung kuliya piece? Walis tambo. Kung ano-anong mga project nyo. Black soil. So, hindi considered na project yun. Donation po yun, siguro, na hinihingi nila. Pero hindi siya supposed to be graded. Manure, ipa, ayan na. Nakarelate na sila sa takkinuwang ko. So, ang project natin, problem-based siya. Pwedeng simulation-based. Pwede din game-based. Kung ang project mo is mag-create sila ng game. Simulation, kunwari, physics, paano ang simulation ng isang earthquake, ay earth and space ganda earthquake simulation siya. Okay, halimbawa, gagawa sila ng isang table na kapag merong disruptions or merong uuga sa lupa ay magfo-fold siya. Tapos magkikreate siya ng parang triangle of life, para doon ka na magdadak, cover and hold. Kunwari, ganon yung project mo, di ba, bongga? Okay, anyway, projects are recommended and encouraged because it gives the students the opportunity to show their competencies. And these are some of the advantages. They relate the learned concept to the outside world. They stimulate the interest of the students. Kung interesado silang matuto, okay, gumawa ng project. Ang problema, kung may mga batang like pag nagbigay ka ng project, nakataas ang kilay. Project naman nun. Akala nila gastos, akala nila burden. They do not see the brighter side of giving projects. So if I were you siguro, ganun na lang, mag-isip na lang kayo ng isang viable project. Kahit na hindi man siya every main topic, every quarter. Pero siguraduhin nyo na may matututunan sila doon. Output-based dapat siya. Okay? Number 3, expose students to a wider range of skills and instruments. Train students in practical design and problem solving. They can also improve on their communication skills kasi from time to time, they can ask you or you can ask them about their progress and they will be able to communicate to you or communicate with their group mates. So that's improvement of communication skills. Or when you ask them to defend their project, that could actually be improve also their communication skills. Group work and its appreciation is also encouraged. So, ganun were the days na kapag nag-group work, leader lang ang gumagawa. Nakakapagod. Tuloy, kapag nagbigay ng project ang teacher, naka-ismid ang mga leader kasi sila na naman lahat ang gagawa. Sasabihin ng isang classmate, agbayad aklatan. That is not the essence of a group work or a project work. Okay? But those are realities. And reality bites. Ang sakit, di ba? Kung natamaan man kayo, bahala kayo dyan. Okay? So this is the time for you to change. Kasi ang mangyayari niyan, you are supposed to be after the learning. Ayan, si Aldrin nagre-react. Okay? So group work and its appreciation is encouraged. And it also promotes interdisciplinary activities, which is good. And these are all really advantages of project work. If we're going to see it really as a work that is supposed to be, ang benefit niya is for you to learn something about the topic. About the topic. Kaya dapat hindi na kayo magpapasubmit ng mga plans. Kaya baka magpapasubmit kayo peti kaldero o paglutuan tayo ito no next year kasi o kaya anything na ilalagay sa laboratory. Hindi po yun project. So I would want you to erase the notion na kapag sinabing project is anything that you can just give. Project work is something that you can manipulate so that you will be able to show your competencies. Kung may advantages, there are also disadvantages and we are open to this. Really, it is time-consuming. Lalo na din kapag may lack of required resources tayo, that could be disadvantageous. Hindi tayo pare-parehas. Yung isang grupo, meron silang laptop, yung isa wala. Tapos ang project namin, gagawa kami ng brochure. Kawawa naman kami. Na-feel ko po yan noong nagpagawa ako ng brochure sa kabilang klase nun, tapos naabutan kami ng pandemic. Feel ko. So ano na lang ang ginawa ko? I asked, hinabaan ko yung deadline para makahiram sila ng mga resources sa mga kapitbahay. Buti na lang, nailasat damot. Kaya lang, talagang mahirap po ito. Lalo na kapag meron kayong lack of resources. Hindi kasi tayo para-paras ng pinanggagalingan. Swerte mo kung meron kang sariling laptop. Paano naman ako? Reality, right? Okay. They're also not directly examinable, especially if it is done at home, for example. You may not know sino talaga ang gumawa. So kung nanay niyang gumawa, sino ang natuto sa paggawa ng project? O, di si nanay. Right? But in our case, since hindi talaga natin nakikita yung mga bata, we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Or we have to remind our students palagi na your project is for them to learn. Pwede silang magpatulong sa bahay, pero huwag nilang ipapagawa sa nanay o sa tatay nila. Patulong lang. Magkaiba po yun. O parang yung sinabi natin nung last SEM, di ba? Bes, patingin nga, guide ko lang. Tapos kinopya na niya yung assignment mo. Scam yun, di ba? Ini-scam yung kaibigan niyo. So, ganun din. Dito sa project, you cannot directly examine who really did the thing. Pero yun nga, i-remind na lang natin sila of the value of learning when they do it. Learning is active. Yun na lang palagi. Hindi ka matututo kung hindi ka mismo ang gagawa. Para na lang sa pagsasaing. Hindi ka matututo magsasaing kung hindi ka nagsasaing. Hindi ka matututo maglalaba kapag hindi talaga ikaw ang naglalaba. Okay? O kaya konsensyahin nyo na lang sila. Sasabihin mo, hindi naman forever na nandyan ang mga parents nyo to do the things that you need to do. So you have to do it yourself. O pa-motivation effect na lang. Because really, hindi directly examinable ang mga projects. Sad to say. Okay? Another, most teachers feel incompetent to supervise projects. So, siguro kayo, when you supervise projects, you just give your all na lang. Tapos, you learn from your experience as well. Hindi naman din kami like, nag-umpisa ka, tapos perfect. Kahit matagal na kami sa profession, we still see gaps in our supervision. And we reflect on that naman. Charge the experience, you learn from your experience nila. So, the next time, when you ask your students to do project, tapos nagkamali ka sa supervision ngayong panahon ko, sa susunod, may itatama mo na. You give second chances to yourself. Binigyan mo nga ng second chance si X, di ba? Bigyan mo din ng second chance ang sarili mo. Okay? And then, lack of reward or motivation for the teachers. Ala, si Joanne Kenneth, akala mo naman may X, huwag kang nagre-react dyan, Joanne. So, we have the, ano na nga, sana nga ako to kasi si Joanne, lack of reward or motivation for the teachers kasi nga very time-consuming talaga yan. Akala nyo ba gusto namin nagpapa-project? Hindi din, mahirap kasi magpa-project. Tapos, syempre, create ka pa ng rubrics. So, akala nyo ba madali maggawa ng rubrics? Hindi din. Akala nyo ba madali mag-check? Syempre, hindi rin. O, yung assignment nyo, SPA, ilang araw kong chinek yun. Kung pwede nga lang hindi ako pa-assignment eh. Pero hindi kasi po yun pwede. The more often that we assess you, the better. Okay? So magpasalamat kayo tuwing magbibigay ng homework si ma'am, sasabihin niya, ay salamat homework manan kasi Jay, dapat yes, attitude, go, go, go lang. Hindi nagbigay ng assignment, sasabihin ni Joanne, hi, assignment manon. O, diba? You have to be really positive kasi gusto namin wala na kaming i-check. Kaya lang, hindi naman po yun po pwede. Okay? You will feel that once you become teachers. Okay, so these are lessons that we can learn from giving projects. Okay, questions so far. Mamang question ko, may ex ba si Juwen? O diba, hindi kasama yan ha. So meron tayong iba't ibang projects. Before we go here, meron ba kayong questions? Sorry. Okay, so seemingly walang questions. Let's move on to the type of projects. Tapos magbe-break tayo mamaya konti. Types of projects. We have experimental, observational, and survey. So sa experimental, ito yung ginagawa talaga sa laboratory period. So they're carried out to investigate some problem. Okay. So observational naman, this is done mainly through observation, collection, and analysis of data which already exists in some form. So, pwede nyo siyang i-compile ang mga observational data nyo, tapos you make meaning of your observations. So, it is very important that we make meaning of our observations. Hindi na-observe mo lang, tapos wala namang kwenta, dahil hindi mo siya ma-interpret. So, data would not speak for itself. You have to interpret your data. Example, ang grade mo, 97, tapos 95 yung grade ng kaklase mo. Tapos parehas kayong highest honors. The interpretation is the verbal description, highest honors. So, dahil ang lalabas lang sa card mo is highest honors, for example, hindi makakapagyabang sa'yo si 97. Dahil 95 ka lang, hindi siya makakapagyabang sa'yo. Kasi remember, ang interpretation ay parehas kayo. Parehas kayong highest honors. Belat ka. 95 lang ako, pero highest honors pa rin ako. You know what I mean? You have to interpret the data. Okay? You have to interpret the data. Okay, kung pass or fail. Tapos 75 hanggang 75 ang pass. Tapos, ang nangyari, 75 yung kaklase mo, 74 ka. Of course, you failed. Magkaiba kayo ng interpretation. You have to interpret your data. And number 3, survey is a type of project where you make use of questionnaires or interviews or both. And this type of project deals mainly with social-scientific issues that are related with the physical sciences. And conclusions are normally drawn from the analyzed and compiled results. So these are the different types of experiments. Sorry. These are the different types of experiments. Experimental, observational, and the survey form of projects. Remember, Projects are supposed to be outcome-based. It is not something that you just send your teacher, just like your examples kanina kung saan nakarelate kayo. But these are the things that would improve your competencies. So those are the 4 that I have chosen na pwede nyo ding pagpilian. Ma'am, paano kapag meron pa po kaming makitang iba pa pong approaches? Pwede pa po ba kaming mamili doon? Why not? You can mix and match. Okay. So first, summarize, we have the number 1, the lecture method. You can choose the integrative lecture method. Number 2, teacher demonstration, where the teacher does the work. It has 3 stages: rehearsing, performance stage, and the discussion stage. Then, our number 1 and number 2 both are more teacher-centered. For numbers 3 and 4 are more learner-centered because it is the students who do the actual work. For number 3, we have student practical work. Nagbigay ako ng 3 designs for you to choose from. It involves the students and it tests their competencies. Ganun din ang project work, which are of 3 types: experimental, observational, and the survey type of project. Okay. So, meron po ba tayong questions so far? Okay. So, kung walang question, we'll do the part 2. I'll give you a 15-minute break. You can leave the classroom and then come back. Or you can just pause the presentation. Okay? I'll see you after 15 minutes. Time check is 3:03. Please be back in our classroom ng 3:18. Thank you. Diyan ba si Hyacinth? Okay, mag-leave muna ako dito sa isa kong I'll see you later. Okay, thank you, Ida, for informing me. Okay, I'll see you later after 15 minutes. Salamat.